My mother stole my $120K inheritance that my dad left me, but when I discovered she forged my signature to sell it, I sued her, got every penny back, and now she's in prison for 3 years. I'm 29 years old. I work as a freelance graphic designer, and the truth is, I've been thinking about writing this for months because I need to get it out of my system. You know? As a way to process everything that happened with my mother and how she basically stole the only thing my father left me before he died. It sounds heavy when I say it like that, but it's literal. I'm not exaggerating even a little bit. My mom, Carol, is 52 now and she's in prison for fraud and forgery, and I'm the one who put her there. And although there are days when I feel guilty about that, most of the time I just feel this weird emptiness mixed with relief that she's finally out of my life. I guess I should start at the beginning. I mean, when I was like 8 years old and my parents got divorced, I don't remember much from that time, honestly. Just flashes of my mom crying in the kitchen and my dad packing his things in boxes. What I do remember perfectly is that I stayed with my mom because that's how the system works. Like mothers almost always get the kids no matter what. And my dad George moved to an apartment on the other side of town. He worked in finance. I think he was an accountant or something like that. And he was always the most present father in the world, considering the circumstances of the divorce. He picked me up every weekend, took me to the movies, helped me with homework, that kind of thing. My mom, on the other hand, was always kind of in her own world. She worked in sales for a beauty products company and basically lived for that and going out with her friends. Like 2 years after the divorce, when I was 10, my mom met Jeffrey somewhere. I think at a bar or at one of those boring networking events. Jeffrey is a contractor. He builds houses and does renovations. And he seemed like a decent guy, honestly. They got married super fast, like within a year of meeting. And when I was 11, my half-brother Jordan was born. And that's where everything started to go bad. Because I basically stopped existing to my mom. It's not that she was mean to me or physically abused me or anything, but it was like I was invisible. Everything revolved around Jordan, the perfect baby, the son of the perfect new marriage. And I was just the daughter from the previous marriage, who didn't matter anymore. Jeffrey tried to include me in things. I'll give him that. But he wasn't my dad either, and I knew it. He knew it. Everyone knew it. The years passed, and I became closer to my dad. Obviously. I spent more and more time at his place, did homework there. Sometimes I'd stay during the week when my mom was too busy with Jordan or with her work. My dad never spoke badly about my mom in front of me, which I appreciate to this day. But I wasn't stupid. I could see that things had ended badly between them. When I was like 15 or 16, I started noticing weird things at my mom's house, like she'd come home late some nights saying she had work meetings, but she smelled like alcohol and perfume different from what she wore. Jeffrey seemed not to notice, or maybe he did notice but didn't want to admit it. I don't know. And then what really destroyed any respect I had left for my mom happened. I was 17. It was summer, and I got home early because an outing with my friends got canceled or something. I came in through the back door because they always left that one open, and I heard weird noises coming from Jeffrey's study. You know where this is going. I opened the door, and there was my mom with a guy who wasn't Jeffrey, not even someone I knew, just some random guy like in his 42nds. They both saw me, and my mom screamed for me to close the door, to leave, and I just stood there, frozen for what felt like forever, but was probably like 10 seconds. Then I ran out, grabbed my stuff, and called my dad crying for him to come get me. That night, I told my dad everything I had seen, and he just hugged me and said it was my decision whether I wanted to tell Jeffrey or not, but that he'd support me in whatever I decided. I didn't say anything at that moment because I was scared. Like, what if Jeffrey gets mad at me for ruining his marriage? What about Jordan? But I basically stopped going to my mom's house completely. I moved in officially with my dad, brought all my stuff, and my mom didn't even put up a fight, just said something like, well, if that's what I wanted. Jeffrey called a couple times asking what had happened, and I just said I needed space, that it was teenager stuff. Whatever. I lived with my dad from 17 until I was like 21, and they were honestly the best years of my life. He supported me when I decided to study graphic design, helped me pay for college tuition. We cooked together on Sundays, watched terrible action movies that we both loved. When I was 19, right before I turned 20, my dad did something that changed everything. He told me he had bought a small apartment, like 2 bedrooms, and that he wanted to put it in my name. The problem was I was still technically underage for certain legal things, Or there was some issue with custody laws, or I don't know what. So he put my mom's name on the paperwork too. But he promised me that when he died or when I reached a certain age, the apartment would be completely mine. I told him he didn't have to do that it was too much, but he insisted, saying he wanted to make sure I had something stable, a place of my own. The apartment wasn't anything fancy. It was in a kind of old building, like 20 minutes from downtown, but it was perfect. It had a tenant who paid rent, and all that money went directly into an account my dad managed for me. I didn't have to worry about anything for years. I just knew that place existed and that someday it would be completely mine. My dad handled everything, talked to the tenant, took care of maintenance, everything. And then my dad got sick. It was when I was 24. I had just graduated from college and was starting to get my first freelance jobs. He was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, which is basically a death sentence because they almost never catch it in time. They gave him like 6 months, maybe a year if the chemo worked. It was the worst months of my life. Watching him deteriorate, losing weight, losing that sparkle he always had in his eyes. My mom showed up a couple times at the hospital, doing that worried mother show, but I could see it was all theater. Jeffrey came too, with Jordan, who by then was like 13, and it was awkward. But Jeffrey was respectful. My dad died 3 weeks before my 25th birthday. It was in the hospital. I was there holding his hand, and his last words were something about making sure I kept the apartment, that everything was legally arranged, that I should check the documents with his lawyer. I just nodded, crying, and told him yes, not to worry. The funeral was small, just some friends of my dad's from work. Jeffrey and Jordan came. My mom arrived late and left early because she had to work or something. After he died, my dad's lawyer contacted me and explained everything. The apartment was officially mine now. My mom never had real access to anything. Her name was on the paperwork only because of that legal technicality from when I was a minor. He gave me all the documents, explained how the rent worked, how to handle the tenant, everything. The rent was like $800 a month. It wasn't a fortune, but it helped a lot with my expenses while I built my career. I kept all the documents in a folder at home and basically forgot about it because the tenant was super responsible. There were never any problems. Everything ran on autopilot. For the next 2 years, my mom and I basically had no contact. We'd text on Christmas and birthdays like generic messages, but nothing more. I was busy with my work. I had met someone. I was building my life. And honestly, I didn't miss her one bit. And then, out of nowhere, like 2 years ago, she started texting me more often. At first were casual messages asking how I was. Then she invited me to dinner a couple times. I went a couple times out of courtesy, but I always felt uncomfortable. Jordan was already a 15-year-old teenager. Jeffrey was still the same quiet, hardworking guy. And my mom was still my mom, talking all the time about herself and her problems. And then the bomb dropped. My mom texted me saying she needed to talk to me about something important, to come to her house. I went on a Saturday afternoon, and she sat me down in the living room and told me that Jordan was going to college soon, that he was already 17 and applying to schools, and that they needed money for tuition. She asked if I could lend them like $15,000. I almost fell off the chair. Like, where did she get that I had that kind of money? I told her no, that I was sorry, but I didn't have those savings, that I was barely establishing myself in my career. She got super defensive, saying that my dad had left me that apartment and that surely I was making good money with the rent. And I told her yes, but that money was for my expenses and for my future, not to lend to anyone. She got angry, told me I was selfish, that Jordan was my brother, that family helps each other. I told her that she had never acted like family to me, that she had basically ignored me since Jordan was born, and that now she couldn't just show up asking for money. We fought bad. She yelled at me, I yelled at her, and I left thinking that was the last time I'd talk to her. And part of me wished it was. But another part? I don't know. You always have that stupid hope that your mom will change, you know? Like 4 months passed after that, and I didn't hear anything more from her. Until one day, like a year and a half ago, I got a call from the tenant of my dad's apartment. Well, my apartment. The guy was super upset, saying he had received an eviction notice, that the apartment had been sold and he had 30 days to leave. I was in shock. Like, I literally couldn't process what I was hearing. I told him there had to be a mistake, that I was the owner of the apartment, that nobody had sold it. He sent me a photo of the eviction document, and sure enough, it said the apartment had been sold like 2 months ago. I started to panic. I called my dad's lawyer, who thank God I still had his number, and explained the situation. He told me to come to his office immediately with all my documents. When I got there and showed him everything, he started investigating, and what we discovered was absolutely insane. My mom had forged my signature, had used the old documents where her name appeared, and had sold the apartment. She just sold it, took all the money, like $120,000, which was the value of the apartment, and thought she was going to get away with it. I couldn't breathe when I found out. It felt like my chest was going to explode. The lawyer told me this was fraud, that it was forgery, that these were serious crimes, and that I had to decide if I wanted to proceed legally. I said yes, immediately, without thinking twice. He started moving everything, contacted the police, filed a formal complaint, and meanwhile I had to confront my mom. I went to her house that same afternoon. I knocked on the door like crazy, and when she opened with that fake surprised face, I just said, "You sold my apartment." She tried to play dumb at first, saying she didn't know what I was talking about, but I yelled at her not to lie to me anymore, that I already knew everything, that she had forged my signature. Then she completely changed her attitude, got defensive, and told me she had done what she had to do, that that apartment technically had her name on it too, that she needed the money for Jordan, for his education, for his future. I told her she was a thief, that it was illegal, that she had stolen the only thing my dad left me. She started crying, saying I didn't understand, that she had sacrificed everything for me when I was a child, that I was ungrateful, that families should help each other. I told her to stop manipulating me, that it wasn't going to work, that I had already contacted a lawyer and the police. Her face changed completely. She turned pale and asked me if I was serious, if I was really going to sue my own mother. I told her yes, absolutely, and left there shaking with rage. The next few months were a legal nightmare. My lawyer filed the lawsuit for fraud and forgery. The evidence was super clear because my mom literally had forged my signature on official documents. Like there's no way to defend against that. She hired a mediocre lawyer who tried to argue it had been a misunderstanding, that she thought she had the right because her name was on the original papers. But the judge didn't believe her at all. The hearings were horrible, having to see her sitting there with her lawyer, trying to look like the victim, saying I was a cruel daughter who didn't understand her family's needs. Jeffrey showed up at one of the hearings, and I could see he was devastated. After one of the sessions, I approached him and told him I needed to tell him something that had happened years ago. We sat at a cafe near the courthouse, and I told him everything about the day I found my mom with that guy. When I was 17, his face completely fell apart, like I could see him breaking inside. He asked me why I hadn't told him before, and I told him the truth, that I had been scared, that I was young and didn't know what to do. He just nodded and said thank you for finally telling him. The trial lasted like 6 months total, with all the hearings and appeals and all that legal shit. In the end, the judge ruled completely in my favor. My mom was found guilty of fraud and forgery of documents, and they sentenced her to 3 years in prison. 3 years. When I heard the sentence, I just sat there, not knowing how to feel. On one hand, I was relieved there was justice, but on the other hand, it was my mom, and even though our relationship was garbage, seeing her being taken away by the officers was surreal. Jeffrey called me like a week after the sentencing and told me he had filed for divorce. He had given all the information about the infidelity I told him about, had hired a private investigator who apparently found more evidence that she had been with other guys during their marriage, and he was basically ending everything. He told me he was sorry for everything I had gone through, that he never really knew what my mom was like until all this exploded. I told him it wasn't his fault, that he had been a good stepfather within what he could, and that I hoped he and Jordan were okay. With the ruling in my favor, I managed to recover the money from the sale of the apartment. The process was complicated because the buyers had already paid and all that legal stuff. But eventually it was resolved and I received the $120,000. I decided not to buy another apartment to rent out. Honestly, that whole experience left me super paranoid about properties and documents and trusting people. Instead, I used the money to make the down payment on a small house for myself, something that's completely mine, where there are no memories of my dad or my mom or anyone, just mine. It's been like 8 months since my mom went to prison. I haven't gone to visit her. I haven't answered the letters she sent me. Nothing. Jordan wrote to me once on Instagram, didn't say much, just something like he was sorry about everything that happened and that he didn't blame me for anything. I replied that it wasn't his fault, that he had nothing to do with our mom's decisions, and we left the conversation there. I don't know if we'll ever have a relationship as siblings. Probably not, but at least there's no resentment between us. My therapist, because yes, I started therapy after all this, tells me what I'm feeling is normal, that it's normal to be angry, that it's normal to feel relief, that it's normal to also feel this weird emptiness where maternal love should be. There are days when I feel guilty, like should I have forgiven her? Should I have given her the money for Jordan from the beginning? But then I remember she stole from me, that she forged legal documents, that she sold the only thing my dad left me without asking, and the guilt disappears. She made her choice. I made mine. Last week, I was fixing up the living room in my new house, hanging some pictures, and I found an old one of my dad and me at the park when I was like 12. We were both smiling. He had his arm around my shoulders, and I started crying right there in the middle of the living room because I realized he would have been proud of me for standing up for myself, for not letting my mom get away with it. And that's enough for now, I guess.